Hello and welcome to Rough Cut, your community driven podcast on navigating the art and practice of video journalism and nonfiction filmmaking, brought to you by the Video Consortium. I'm Kevin Merida, this episode's guest host, and I'm joined by the great Dawn Porter. I'm a longtime journalist and media executive myself, currently working on a year-long essay series on LeBron James for the Washington Post. My guest, Dawn, is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and founder of the production company Trilogy Films. Her work has appeared on ESPN, Netflix, HBO, PBS, Showtime, Paramount Plus, CNN, and elsewhere, so many places. Her films have included Deadlock, How America Shaped the Supreme Court, The Lady Bird Diaries, Bobby Kennedy for President, John Lewis, Good Trouble, one of my favorites, and her most recent masterpiece, Luther, Never Too Much. Dawn, there's so much for us to talk about. The state of video storytelling, the opportunities, but I want to start with Luther.
Okay, start with
That
you.
was so good.
I'm happy to start there.
What drove you to Luther? It's like he's like the crooner of our times, certainly of my generation.
Um, well, first, it's such a pleasure, always a pleasure to speak with you. And I have so many questions for you. So I will start with Luther, but we'll quickly get, I hope, to things that I've long been curious about in your career and also kind of what you're thinking about, future. I think we're all thinking about what does the future of journalism look like with some very disturbing trends. But before that, the fun, and that is really what brought me to Luther is, as you mentioned, the projects that I have done, largely political, often based on legal topics. My background is I'm a lawyer, and I just needed a little art and music. And when I realized there was no film about Luther, I just kind of wondered why that was. Um, there's always so many reasons why there's not a film about a particular artist. Um, and here it was really just time. So I met with the family, I met with the estate, and we just got along. I think that they trusted me with the story. Um, so that, like, be careful what you wish for. Like you're just like dancing as fast as you can and be like, and then as soon as they were all saying yes, I was like, oh man, I can't mess up Luther. I'll be excommunicated. But the film really, the one thing I knew was that I wanted to let him have tell his story as much as possible. And so I spent a lot of time along with my fabulous producer, Leah Smith, and our wonderful editor, Mark Faison, who edits a lot with Stanley Nelson. And that's how I met Mark, the editor. We had never worked together before. Um, but we all just watched all of these interviews that he had given. And a lot of them he had just given for like electronic press kits. So they're not things the general public would see a lot. They would see little bits and pieces for, press tours. But the full interviews were so revealing. And he really addressed so many questions that people have had about him. Where did he start? Who were his inspirations? What did he think about in writing? How did he want to be thought of? And once you start to listen, like, you can really hear kind of the story of his life. And it was so authentic because, I do have a journalism background. So you don't just take what people say,
Right.
you kick the tires on it. And what he said lined up so well with what music journalists had said about him, what other artists had said about him. So the film just really came together. It was just so smooth. It was like Luther, you know. Um, so it was a lot of fun.
He was super smooth. But and for the audience, I'm assuming everybody knows Luther. We're giving him first name credit, Luther Vandross, like everybody knows him. I hope if they don't know, they should know. Um, but just a beautiful singer. And one of the things that I didn't know about, and I heard this from some of my friends, was just him singing jingles, and a lot of the things we might have known, we didn't know that was Luther. We heard these songs and commercials, and wait a minute, that was Luther.
Juicy fruit gum, yes. The Olympics, story. Just you're right, and that is part of his story, is that Luther was everywhere, but you didn't necessarily know that he was the voice behind some of those things that we're so familiar with. And that really was, that, and also him appearing on Sesame Street as a teenager in a group,
That's
and we
crazy.
have the footage of that. Um, but there's a deeper significance to that too, which is Luther's early career was he was kind of pushed to the back, and it was his talent that brought him to the front. And there are reasons he was pushed to the back, even though he was, as his, collaborators would say, the most talented person. He was, a dark skinned, heavy black boy, and he didn't look like what people thought a front man should look like. Um, but he knew that he had the talent, so he kept going, and it really took um, a lot of help from some fantastic performers, including David Bowie, Roberta Flack, pushing him to the front and saying, no, it's your talent that you lead with. And that's really part of his story.
It's interesting because even if you're not a music fan, you can find things in there that are universal themes. I think the struggle with weight loss, the fluctuating weight, and that gets at identity, how we're seen regardless of our talent or skills, and not only how the outside world would see someone like that, but how you have to struggle with it internally. And I just wondered, how did you process that part of it yourself, and just thinking about how to tell that part of it?
Like a lot of people, growing up, I read Jet magazine, and you would see the, like, how much does Luther weigh? How big is he now? Is there something wrong? Rumors that he died. I mean, just when he got thin, and it was this constant battle. One thing that was so interesting was he was on the Oprah show, more than a dozen times, and they both were struggling in public with weight, and he literally didn't feel presentable at times when he was heavy. But it was painful for him. When we were, I like to do archival research. I just think it tells you so much about the time, and the way that talk show hosts would ask him about his weight. We could have had a half an hour of just clips of people saying, how much do you weigh? You've lost a lot of weight. You look great. Just like so intense, and really not treating him like a person. So he had to live that struggle in public out loud. Can you imagine somebody asking you all the time, like, what do you weigh? They would literally say, what do you weigh? We would not do that today. I hope we would not do that.
No, I hope interviewing has gotten better and more, respectful and considerate and sophisticated.
You see what it did to him is, it really affected him. Um, it was something that he struggled with. It was really, really difficult struggle for him.
The craft of documentary filmmaking, so much goes into it. I often hear people say archive can be a determinant, of whether or not we can make this film or not. And I just wondered what are the, I don't know, I won't say tricks or techniques, or how do you get around? First of all, how do you find what you need to find? And because sometimes it's out there, you just can't find, you can't get it. It's the same thing in reporting. You know what you need, but you can't get it. And then, but the story goes on, because you got to produce the story. But how do you make the choice of, I just don't have enough, or, all right, I've come up with a way to get around what I don't have?
It's such a good question, and it really depends on, I used to work for ABC News, and so, the reporters would call it B-roll,
Hmm.
and it was the throwaway kind of stuff in the background. And when I started making films, there definitely was a trend that I really embraced, which is it's not B-roll, it's the roll. It's what you want to see. So a few times, and I did this in a film called The Ladybird Diaries, which was all archive. Um, we had 123 hours of her audio tapes. And then we took those audio tapes and we married them with archival. And Ladybird, most people don't remember or know that she was a journalism major. She had a dual degree from the University of Texas in journalism and in history, I think. And Ladybird would keep a diary where she would write the name of every reporter who attended her events. So she would have the date and the name of the reporter and their affiliation. So when we first started looking for archive to match with her diaries, we did what we normally do. You go to Getty and all the photography sites and all the NBC, ABC, CBS, all the places, and you put in the date and the name. And when we first did that, like almost nothing came back. And I said, this is not possible. In 1967, like there's nothing from the First Lady of the United States. So then we put in Mrs. Johnson, a little bit more, and then President's wife, not even her name. And then more came. And I thought, I know that she was giving all these speeches. I have these diaries here. So then we started looking at her speeches. And instead of looking for her name, we would say, Nancy Dickerson was at this event on November whatever, 19 whatever. Can we have that archive? And there was Ladybird. So, a really important thing for archive is who is doing the labeling,
Mm.
who is noting the significant people. Um, I'm right now working on a film about Winnie and Nelson Mandela. There was a piece of archive that we found that has Malcolm X in it,
Mm.
talking about Mandela and talking about whether we should be violent or not. So I've never seen this video of Malcolm X,
Mm.
you
Wow.
know. And so the cataloger really matters. But to answer your question, um, for me, the archive is the story. So, we start with an outline of what we think are the facts because they're reported by other people, right? But then we go to the footage. And what does the footage tell you? And that's what you have to follow, is what the footage is telling you, because that may not be what you thought it was.
Mm.
So that is part of the beauty of the craft of making the film. And then I think the other thing that, I think makes a big difference is letting it play out. Sometimes those very small moments are so important. And there's a trend in a lot of television, a lot of, quick, 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 quick. And they think that's what the audience wants. And I find people actually like to sink into something and they appreciate the little details. And so in Luther, we let the songs play out so you can sing and a satisfying sing, we let the footage play out where we could. Um, so part of it is what kind of feeling you're trying to give to people. Sometimes you want to speed it up and you want people to feel rushed. But a lot of times you want people to slow down and pay attention. And that's when you got to trust your storytelling instincts. Like, here, I want you to slow down. Sometimes we'll even repeat things because people need to hear certain things a couple of times if they're not familiar. So we did that a lot with Lady Bird. Is like, people just don't remember how influential she was to legislations. Lady Bird is credited with starting about 300 laws that LBJ signed, in environmental protection laws that LBJ ended up signing, but it's Lady Bird's work that started those initiatives. And then they went to Congress, and then he signed those laws. So if you're not used to that story, you got to hear it a couple times for it to sink in.
This is how it works. When someone is telling about the work, it draws you into the work. So I'm listening to you. I haven't seen the labor. Now I want to go see it. I can't wait to see it.
The other thing is, it's about her, but it's not by her. Like, she's not always doing the right things. There's one of my favorite segments of the film is she invites Eartha Kitt to the White House. And Eartha Kitt asked LBJ a question that he does not care for. And Lady Bird goes like after her. It was national news. It was front page Washington Post news about Lady Bird's argument with Eartha Kitt. And then Eartha Kitt never was in another film after that interaction. Wow. And so, did you ever wonder what happened to Eartha Kitt?
I actually did.
This is part of the story. No one can say that the president and first lady did anything specifically, but it's an awful coincidence that this happened. So it's not all her finest moments. What I think that story tells you, though, is, and I think that there's always like another deeper meaning. And so you're kind of looking for what are those deeper meanings. I think Lady Bird really loved LBJ. She was a warrior for her husband. Sometimes she didn't behave so well. And even though LBJ cheated on her, even though he could be a rough customer, there was something in that marriage where they were a true partnership. And, that's important that we see these leaders with these true partnerships. I think those people tend to do some of the greatest things. Mm-hmm. And, if you're not just the lone wolf, and we can think of a number of other presidents who really respected their wives. Yeah. And their wives, kind of thoughtful participation in governing.
Well, your journalism background is coming through clear in this conversation, right? And in the work. And obviously there are lots of documentaries that are done of all kinds. And I'm not here to throw shade on some or others. Everybody's doing the best work, doing the work they should be, they feel moved to do. There is a trend I do concerns me some. It comes with athletes, celebrities, others, and the idea, they form their own production companies, and they essentially want to make the film they want to make, and so you don't have the same kind of what we would normally say in our profession, the journalistic rigor, the clear eye, assessment of a life or a time or a period or whatever we're documenting. And I just kind of wonder how you think about that.
We deal with this all the time. There's the overt kind of editorial control, which I never give over. I just don't. I just won't do it if someone says they have final cut over their own story. And I've turned down some pretty interesting things because of that. But there's another danger, which is when you're making a film like this and you're looking at so many interviews, you kind of fall in love with the person. Like, mm-hmm. I can tell you how Luther will answer questions just based on the 1,000 hours of him that I have watched over these last 2 years. I could tell you how John Lewis will answer a question. I can recite speeches because Mr. Lewis tended to make the same speech over and over. So because you fall a little bit in love with some of these people. And so you self-censor what you think will make them look bad. And you really have to fight against that. You also have to feel like if I present something that maybe is not going to be perceived well by the subject, I have to still be able to look them in the eye or
Mhm.
look their family in the eye and say, yes, we said this. Yes, it is true. And yes, there's a place for this in the story,
Yeah.
because I don't know of a perfect person. So in the John Lewis documentary, he was not great in his congressional race with Julian Bond.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it was more important to include that story because it tells you something about John Lewis as a man. He is not a deity. He never pretended to be a deity. We did that. And what it showed me is he really wanted to go to Congress, and he really didn't want to be underestimated because Julian Bond was such an elaborate orator and handsome, traditionally handsome. And it was assumed that Julian Bond was going to win that congressional seat. And John Lewis said, not so fast. I've been underestimating my entire life, not so fast. So to me, knowing how much he wanted that seat was really important. He wanted that maybe more than offending his friend.
Yeah, I mean that was an epic congressional race. I wrote about that for the Washington Post. In fact, I think it was maybe the first time I met John Lewis, was during that time, and then of course I got to know him over time and covered him in Congress and got to know him very well. But that was that was a battle. Certainly divided Atlanta, divided Black Atlanta, and nationally divided. Civil rights figures and
And
everybody.
that's important too,
Yeah.
is that lest Black America be thought of as a monolithic community. We don't get full humanity unless we're allowed individual thought.
Yeah.
And so showing these intra community, kind of battles, and they are epic battles.
Yeah.
um, I think that was interesting to me, and they managed to work it out personally. And of course, they both went on to have great, great careers. But I mean, that does bring me, I'm very, very curious about, of course, I'm very worried about documentary going forward because we have all the consolidation in media. And what people don't realize is when you have this consolidation, you could have one party editorially controlling a number of outlets. So it appears as if there's all these outlets, but actually they all roll up into one place. But I wonder how you see the media consolidation.
I probably should be more worried about things than I am. It's I think my disposition is always by any means necessary, to try to find the way to do the work. I think part of just the training of being a journalist over time and just the longevity that I've had in it, it just makes me, it deepens my commitment to the profession and to the craft of storytelling. I think what we do has evolved. It's taken we brought other forms together and collectively very powerfully, and there are going to be ways to tell the story and outlets to tell it. It's a concern if we shrink the outlets because then you can have a withering of the craft just by where we practice it. How can we distribute it? But there are a lot of great developments. I think. I mean, I think in journalism, the nonprofit journalism uh, outlets that are starting and being funded by foundations and there's a lot of civic interest in journalism in a way that I think there wasn't a kind of a relationship. People who are running foundations in cities are saying, look, it's one thing for a newspaper here to decline and shrink, but we can't not have journalism. And so there's support for it that I think didn't exist before because I don't think the foundations in places that are interested in this issue or that issue saw journalism as something that was going to be in alignment with their goals. And I think now people realize, man, if you don't really have a informed citizenry, and particularly in communities where the people live, then the rest of the agenda, whatever your agenda is, going to be difficult to get done. And so to me, it's a positive development, but I think it's also given new life to journalists, to try to say like every model doesn't have to be, can we create another New York Times or another Washington Post or even another Detroit Free Press, um, some of it is just, man, find that community that needs you, anchor there, be close to it, not operate with a long lens, which I think has been one of the things we struggle with in our profession. Like, we never want to be too close to sources or feel like, it hurts our objectivity. And so we come with a long lens. We come in and talk to people, but I think we've got to get closer. And I think it's a really big problem for us with trust. Like, we're so distant. The technological era has just created a level of distance that hurts us and hurts us journalistically, accountability wise, storytelling wise. We just don't know our fellow human beings well enough. And I think that's a big part of our problem.
I think that is really, really important. And I have seen, some of the best reporting is coming out, like Mississippi Today, like it's coming out of these local places. And what I see is kind of a deeper understanding of the community. So, there's lots of discussions about who can tell a story. Do you have to be of the same ethnic or religious background in order to really understand? But part of it is what you're saying, which is you need to understand the community that you're covering and understand where you might be missing something that's really important context. I've seen a lot of folks, we say they like kind of parachute into a place and they're focused on the bright, shiny, the loudest voice in the community instead of the most accurate or important voice in the community. So I do think, having mentors to say to up and coming journalists, it is okay to know your sources. You have the, integrity and fortitude to withstand your bias. You gotta look your bias in the eye, but that shouldn't stop you from getting, quote unquote close.
I mean, and here's the thing. I mean, we can learn from each other. I mean, one of the things that the digital era has created is more people with access to the tools and the platforms to do their work. I mean, you don't have to get hired by somebody. You can put your work now right out there on a social platform. We've seen some tremendous local reporting in the LA fires coverage.
Yeah.
Which is just a billboard for what it means to have really strong local journalism. It's been done by a lot of different people, and certainly I would give credit to LA Times, but lots of other places, and just people who've gone out and done a live stream. People who go to the place and bring it to you as it's happening. And I wonder how you think about something that's happening live, just from the documentary, filmmaker's eyes, because I don't know how to think about some of it. Is like, let's wait, and some of it is, no, let's get in there, right now.
I mean, you do have to balance, not being the kind of voyeuristic trauma porn
Yeah.
people. There's going to be lots of, because there is so much pain and so much suffering. Um, and I think that we should certainly cover that. We should understand what's happening. But for me, I always think that's what the newspapers do. They do the immediate. what the long form or the, like the reason we take years to do something is so that you're looking for what does this tell us? And so one of the things that I've been really moved by is so many stories that show our connectedness. And so, like, I was so impressed and moved by the illustrator who is, drawing the homes of people who've lost their homes. And it's certainly her instinct that people need to have this memory. But I do think when we think of journalism, we're thinking too narrowly. We're just thinking about these big organizations. And you know what? Sometimes they don't move that quickly.
Yeah, look, I think all institutions, I mean, ours is right up there at the at the top. We produce our work every day, and we do it in public, right? Not a lot of professions that do their work in public every day under incredible deadline pressure. And a lot of times when you see journalism getting criticized, there's not some intentional, conspiracy to do harm to this group or that group, or not tell the truth. Sometimes it's just simple. We ran out of time. We didn't get all the information, or human error. And journalists deserve grace for, man, just doing their best. Most of all the journalists I know about, they take their profession seriously. When they make a mistake or they get something wrong, man, they're crushed by it, right? I've had to call people and, in a capacity leader, and they're having a party, with kids over to their house with their daughter, but yeah, there's a mass shooting like up the street, and they pivot, and then they get into a whole different mindset. It's very difficult work to do, and do it consistently well. I really have been impressed and think about, like, how can you draw on the people who have the most credibility in communities and draw on them to help tell your stories, and this is, it was a very tragic, heartbreaking situation to have Darnella Frazier sit there and record George Floyd's murder.
Hmm.
But in a sense, she was doing a very important piece of documentary video taping. Like, this was for history, and the pressure it must have been to do that at a teenage. But what I thought about after that, and as a member of the Pulitzer Prize Board, we gave a special citation to her. But what I really thought about was, like, outside of that horror, people who are just living there, chronicling their own communities, and I think we need to do more of the kind of thing to tie our profession to the subjects that we cover, and I think it's something that will continue to develop, and I think it's easier to do that when places are very rooted locally.
I really, really think that that is exciting, but I also think that the underpinning, the core of what you're talking about, is demystifying the process of journalism and stop making it like it comes from Mount Olympus and you have to, spring from Zeus's head in order to do it, and say there are some fundamental principles. You tell the truth as you see it. You say why you think what you saw is true. you you go to multiple sources, and you're honest about what your limitations might be, and just explain it to folks. People understand what it's like to what it means to be an ethical person. They don't. I agree with you that most people I have seen do not mean to be doing something that we think of as unethical. But we got to stop holding tight to it's only for a few of us who have the rules that can do this. The rest of you can't. And that's just not true. And that's just not how it should be.
And look, as we were talking about, our profession is not monolithic, right? It's you can do man, you can be rooted in the community and making sure you stop by the local laundromat and make sure you tell Tory, but we still got to hold presidents accountable and hold, local government accountable. And we still got to do that hard, rigorous investigative reporting to keep people honest, and reveal things that need to be revealed. And that, that is at a level that, there's not a wide range of places and people that can do the hardest, most difficult work, because those do require a level of kind of skill, and also those platforms can withstand, because when you hold people accountable, the powerful accountable, they come after you, and we've seen that and file lawsuits, and you got to be willing to defend your work. And that's at another level of our profession that has to continue, and can't be intimidated into not continuing that work of holding the most powerful people in the country and the cities and the states accountable.
And that's where documentary filmmaking is going to be challenged, because you're not going to get commissions to do that work as easily as you once would. And then even if you can raise private money to do that work, it's not clear where it's going to be distributed. And so you've got a double burden. So I don't think it's going to stop. I just think it's going to demand more of the filmmaker. And not all filmmakers have a journalistic background or training or even inclination. And so we're going to have, fewer of those kind of long form investigative pieces. But there will be some. And I actually think that in playing the long game, it's the people who continue to do that work thoughtfully and carefully. It's going to stand out in the marketplace, the commercial marketplace, but also in the marketplace of ideas, because it's going to become more rare.
Are there things that you think about, and you're just thinking about your career and how it's gone, that you would like to do, like dream things, or you think, hey, something I really love to do I haven't done?
I do. And, usually that's when you see a film that just really knocks you down, So for me, one of those is Ramel Ross's Nickel Boys. And just watching how experimental and, the visual shifting the point of view is just, I cannot stop thinking about how he shifted your point of view in a way that keeps you off balance, but tells you so much. It also decenters the filmmaker, which we don't often think about. You're seeing what I want you to see. I've picked every frame. But what if you decenter and you think about it from the character? It makes you go deeper into the character.
I think that's the gift that creators give each other, right? You see something you like and you draw something from it and say, maybe I can do something, not necessarily copycat, but I'm going to draw on that and put my own spin on it, And I think that's beautiful. I think we're getting out of time, because me and you can talk forever. I love talking to you. Shoot, I draw inspiration just talking to you. So I can't wait to see you again, and we'll get a meal and chop up some more things. This episode of Rough Cut was hosted by me, Kevin Merida, and produced by Audrey Horwitz. Executive produced by Sky Dylan-Robbins and Kat Vecchio. Our original music is by Zach Wright. Thanks for joining.
Rough Cut is part of the Vecchio Consortium, which is a global creative community and organization that supports the world's nonfiction filmmakers and video journalists to tell bold stories that catalyze change. We would love for you to join our nonfiction film family, and you can learn more at vecchioconsortium.org.
And we love hearing from listeners. So if you would like to send us a note, you can find us on Instagram at Rough Cut Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@videoconsortium.org. And don't forget to rate us and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe. Thank you, and see you soon.